Today's show is sponsored by Yafa Bay and her Spirit of Teppereth Marketplace. For you and your naturally special gifts, we of the Spirit of Teppereth, through our metaphysical market located at 1273 West Broad Street in Columbus, desire to provide you guidance and support through this, your life's journey. We provide tools such as candles, incense, charms, jewelry, wall hangings, oils, crystals, and much more. We look forward to spiritual growth with you at the Spirit of Teppereth. We would also like to thank Mr. Van A. Nixon Jr. for his gracious donation towards our equipment for the show. Your kindness and support is greatly appreciated. You can find all our sponsors' information in the show notes on our website. Now let's start the show.
The controversial group leader in charge, ADOS, or the American descendants of ADOS. The controversial group ADOS, or the American descendants of the controversial group ADOS, the American descendants of the controversial group ADOS.
We did it. We started a podcast. Can you believe it?
I can believe it.
It's been a fun ride getting everything prepared for this moment. The mistakes, the changes, the learning what works and what doesn't. And finally, the Articles of ADOS podcast is here.
Hooray!
A weekly show where we bring you undiscussed news, articles, and information important to the American descendants of slavery, our friends, and our allies. And this is episode 1. I'm your host, Lisa Todd, along with my co-host,
Daoud Giazan.
On this first episode, we want to introduce ourselves. Just let you know a little bit about who we are and why we started the podcast, etc., so on and so on. This is where our personalities are supposed to shine. Do we have personalities?
I hope so.
I'm always a little bit serious and a little bit silly. What are you a little bit of?
A little bit too serious.
Too serious. So we got enough for everybody. So to tell you about myself, again, my name is Lisa. I'm a social worker by day and a new activist, part-time on the weekends and nights. There is no secret I am a part of ADOS because Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore started making videos that made sense to me. They talked about my condition and my community, and I had enough. I needed to do more than just watch social media. I had to get involved. So at the time, Mark Stevenson, our fearless leader of ADOS Columbus, was having a meetup. I went and I met up with, I believe, 5 other people, and I've been involved ever since. We've done some great things in Columbus in a short amount of time, and we've only just begun. Tell us about yourself.
Let's see. I've really been in this space since 2000, after the 2000 presidential election, and also learning from the great Dr. Claude Anderson's work. I really saw a need at that time for us to be a particular group of people to address our concerns. By the Great Recession, which was really white elites undermining our economy, I really began to see the impact of the trashing of the economy and what it had on our children in particular as a therapist at that time. 2 to 3 year period after that, children were coming in with nearly quadruple the number of diagnosable mental health problems, along with their caregivers whose mental health diagnoses virtually doubled. And so I realized that our people were seriously under stress. And I also knew, like Tone, that Mr. Obama was not going to see to those ever worsening needs. And he didn't. So by the time I get to hear Yvette and Tone, and particularly to Yvette when she talks about her background, it's my background like hers is almost virtually the same. I decided to really be a good advocate for ADOS and decided to participate. And as a result, I was interviewed on a friend's online radio program, and I was heard by Brother Sean Hill out of Texas, who encouraged me to start my own YouTube, but I'm not really much into being seen. Although I was preparing to get started in April, you came and contacted me and said, let's get this started. And I said, hey, I'm ready to follow.
let's dive into that. Why did I start this podcast? I noticed that as a new activist, I was watching Yvette's and Tone's videos. I was following everyone on Twitter. There was a lot of information being shared, and I just couldn't keep up. A lot of it, I was missing it. So I knew if I was missing it, other people were missing it as well. So being the little helper that I am, I said, well, how can I help out? How can I help ADOS? Yvette and Tone can't do everything. Our leader in Columbus can't do everything by himself. He always will need our help. And this is my way of offering help to the ADOS movement. Initially, I wanted to take the angle that we're going to do a podcast and we're going to bring new activists and experienced activists together. And I know the perfect guy. That was you, because following you on Facebook, you would share a lot of information, a lot of articles that no one else was sharing, and you were providing a lot of great commentary and thought behind those articles. So I reached out to you and said, hey, I got an idea. What you think about this? And I waited for you to hit me back because up to that point, we've only, said pleasantries, hellos, and goodbyes at our ADOS Columbus meetings, monthly meetings. So I had my fingers crossed that you would be on board. And so what did you think of this lady out of nowhere contacting you about a podcast?
Well, Mr. Mark had asked me to perform in research and information duties for the local chapter. And given that Mr. Sean Hill had encouraged me to do my own type of program, when you asked, I was readily eager. Plus, I hadn't really gotten started yet, and I decided that April would be the date. And so when you said that was the time that you wanted to get things started, I thought, well, we met right on time. So I really appreciate you considering me and looking at my work. I was sending it out there, hoping that people would get that information from my posts and would therefore strengthen everybody on the team. But I'm also glad that it encouraged you to seek me out.
I don't know how to explain the excitement I felt once you said yes. I was like, it almost, the vision of what I had was at that point complete, and all I just needed to do was start planning, start getting things set up for us to move forward. And during this process of setting up this podcast, we've gone through different outlines, different ways of doing each segment, different ways of getting the news to you and how we're going to do that. And ultimately, we decided that we're just going to bring you news we think you've missed. It's just that simple, and maybe crack a stale joke or two. But we just want to make sure you're not missing anything that's important to you.
I'm also hopeful that we'll continue with one of the earlier things that you did say that you wanted us to accomplish was also to usher in new members and get a taste from experienced people what to expect and how to become involved.
Yes, all of that. All right, so that's enough about us, right?
Right.
Right. So every week we'll do a little personality piece, give you a glimpse of who we are. That being said, let's get into this podcast.
All right.
Are you busy? Is the news coming so fast you can barely keep up? No worries. The Articles of ADOS podcast is here to help. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now, and we'll make sure you stay up to date on the news and information that affects you and your ADOS life.
On today's show, we will share articles from The Chimes, Black Chronicles, Vox, and USA Today. Later in the show, stay tuned for our main event, where we dive into and interview the article, Reparations, One Necessary Step Towards Black Freedom.
Catch the fire. If you're ADOS, an ally, or friend, we encourage you to connect with a local ADOS chapter and help change your local politics. Our ADOS Ohio chapter in Columbus meets every fourth Sunday of the month. For more information on the time and location, visit adoscolumbus.org.
If you also need more information on the ADOS movement, our politics, and the agenda, please visit ADOS101.com.
If you're having an event and would like it to be featured on the show, please email us and we will be glad to announce it. Today in Rapid News Reports, we have some articles that you may have missed, all in some way affect you and your ADOS life. Up first, we have...
It's time for the Democratic Party to support reparations. In the wake of Super Tuesday, the race for the Democratic nomination has now significantly narrowed. What began as the more diverse primaries in history has become a fight for the soul of the Democratic Party, the left or the center. But out of all the issues brought up during the primary this year, I was disappointed by the lack of discussion around reparations for Black Americans. While it was mentioned on the debate stage once or twice, the best response coming surprisingly from the Heal It with Love candidate, Marianne Williamson. The Democrats have continued to avoid an issue that should be considered part of the standard platform. This is from the publication The Chimes, a Capital University newspaper, written by Catherine Poe. I give this article a grade OK.
From the publication USA Today, titled, Marianne Williamson says former candidates endorsing Biden was a coup. Tagline, author and former Democratic candidate Marianne Williamson called it a coup that former candidates threw their support behind former Vice President Biden. In a since-deleted tweet, Williamson also went after pundits calling Biden's campaign a resurrection. She endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders in February and has been campaigning on his behalf at some events. What happened yesterday was a coup, Williamson said, alluding to the wave of endorsements from the former candidates, and we will push back. She pushed out an additional tweet Tuesday night that the moderates did not organically fall into place behind Biden today. What happened was the result of a strategized, orchestrated plan to block someone deemed inconvenient to the political establishment, she continued. Williamson tweeted Monday night, following the endorsements, Pete and Amy both endorsing Biden tonight. They must have read Art of the Deal, a dig at President Donald Trump's infamous book. Writer, Savannah Berman, I grade this a good. The reason why I gave it good is because as Democratic presidential candidates were forming, people wondered why so many were throwing their hats into the ring. I said at the time that the DNC was permitting this. My guess at the time was that some of those campaigns were set up in order to act as an advertisement for the established corporate order, as a counterbalance to the Democratic Socialist Sanders campaign. The coordinated mass exodus and endorsement of Biden's run for the presidency was no surprise to me. And next up we have...
The rise of Black businesses and home ownership won't close the racial wealth gap. Recent studies have shown that it will take more than a home or a business to solve racial inequities. Even if someone has the necessary things needed to own a home or a business, the legacy of racial segregation has left a lasting effect on how companies perceive African American customers and their profitability. A report from the Brookings Institution found a correlation between positive reviews on Yelp and revenue growth for white businesses, but not for minority-owned businesses. In fact, the exact opposite happens. Businesses located in predominantly Black neighborhoods with high Yelp ratings saw less revenue growth between 2016 and 2019 than poorly rated businesses in predominantly white neighborhoods. This is reported from theblackchronicles.com. I give this article a score of good.
From Vox, titled, How Slavery Became America's First Big Business. Tagline, historian and author Edward E. Baptist explains how slavery helped the U.S. go from a colonial economy to the second biggest industrial power in the world. The argument has often been used to diminish the scale of slavery, reducing it to a crime committed by a few Southern planters, one that did not touch the rest of the United States. Slavery, the argument goes, was an inefficient system, and the labor of the enslaved was considered less productive than that of a free worker being paid a wage. The use of enslaved labor has been presented as pre-modern, a practice that had no ties to the capitalism that allowed America to become, and remain, a leading global economy. The slavery economy of the U.S. South is deeply tied financially to the North, to Britain,
to the point that we can say that people who were buying financial products in these other places were in effect owning slaves and were extracting money from the labor of enslaved people. I scored this article a good. The reason was that this article speaks directly to the connection between enslaved labor and modern capitalism, an education and link purposely omitted in our K through 12 education. You know why.
And that's it for today's Rapid News Reports. All articles will be shared in our Facebook group and in our show notes on our website. Before we get to our main event, we want to introduce a segment called Say a Word, where we will highlight prominent voices of historical leaders and politicians that in some way relates to our main article.
Today we are sharing a clip of Morgan Harper, candidate for the Congressional 3rd District in Ohio, who explained her vision of a reparation plan. In it, you will see an example of what a Black agenda-focused candidate should sound like.
Well, I would just add a little bit more to that one in particular because reparations, so I've been calling it systemic reparations, and I can provide a little bit more background as to why. Oftentimes, and I'm sure a lot of us have experienced this, the buzzword, and for some people, they hear reparations, they think slavery, and if I didn't have a direct connection to slavery, then I have no responsibility for any of the issues that we're talking about. And I've found, while talking to people in our district, that systemic reparations invites a conversation, keeps people listening, and there's a lot of education that needs to happen for folks to understand the legacy of racial injustice that has occurred not in the distant past, but right here in our community up until the present day. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it was important to include systemic reparations on the platform. Where Congress has been to date in this generation of political leadership has been mostly focused on H.R. 40. It's a bill that talks mostly about slavery and talks about studying the issue. And I believe that the studying should have concluded a long time ago. We know the facts, and now we need to be moving very aggressively towards solutions. What is it going to look like to actually pass legislation that will address the racial wealth gap that is over $100,000 between Black and white families in this country? And our district, the 3rd district, being one of the most safe Democratic districts in the entire country, can actually be a national leader in moving that conversation forward to solutions.
Due to the coronavirus, voting has been postponed here in Ohio. We are waiting to see when and how we are going to vote. But right now, the primary election is pending. And whenever we do vote, we certainly wish Morgan good luck in her fight.
Time now for the main event.
In our very first main event, we have the pleasure of interviewing the article, Reparations, One Necessary Step Toward Black Freedom, written by Darrel Thompson for Clasp.org.
How this works is, based on what's written in the article, we are able to pull out questions and get answers directly from the writer, verbatim.
This week I will ask the questions and Daoud will give the answers. So let's just jump right into it and show you how we will interview the articles. So how long has reparations been of concern to the descendants of the formerly enslaved?
Reparations for descendants of enslaved Black people have been discussed on and off at least since the end of the Civil War. But the conversation has been reignited by an inflamed racist political climate, drawing renewed focus to the nation's racist past.
What recent initiatives or gestures have ensued due to the reigniting of the interest in reparations?
Last spring, students at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. voted to create a fund benefiting descendants of enslaved Black people sold by the university.
How has the political establishment responded?
All Democratic presidential candidates have stated they support studying reparations. And last June, Congress held a hearing on a bill to study reparations and propose solutions.
With the return of heightened interest, has the path to reparations been a singular one?
Instead of reparations, some argue that a better path is incremental policy change, such as addressing disparities in education and making neighborhoods safe. On its face, that seems sensible, given current public opinion on reparations and the stubborn inequities in Black life. Black males in public schools score about 30 points lower than white males in reading in the 4th grade, with the gap persisting at 8th grade. Though cannabis usage rates are similar, Black people are arrested nearly 3 times as much as white people. Babies born to Black women with doctorates or professional degrees are about 3 times more likely to die than babies born to white women with only high school diplomas or GEDs. In deciding which policies to advocate for, there's a tension between grand, aspirational issues like reparations and more immediate, achievable solutions that must be pursued when appropriate. But the two aren't mutually exclusive or substitutes for one another. They are priorities that can and should be pursued side by side. Yet that's easier said than done. But reparations aren't just another policy with costs and benefits to assess. They're about something deeper.
How so?
Reparations are not a handout, just one piece of legislation or a check. Reparations are about Black life, Black freedom, justice, and wholeness. They're about whether the United States government will acknowledge the inhumanity of enslavement, segregation, and other forms of government-authorized discrimination and work to repair those injustices. Acknowledging Black people's full humanity demands justice in reparations.
Are there any steps that can be taken to better ensure public support or at least achieve understanding of this most important need for repair?
There are a couple of things that can be done to move reparations forward. First, educating the public about the atrocities against Black people should be prioritized. They include not only enslavement, but land theft, federal complicity in white mob terror, such as lynching, discrimination in the GI Bill, housing, labor, and mass incarceration. And second, coalitions must be formed with indigenous peoples in the United States and other persecuted people who have been injured by the federal government. Such coalition could build a broad-based movement and help develop reparations in the United States as a legal, enforceable, race-neutral norm. Moreover, it would affirm that true justice is not zero-sum.
Aside from the very important concerns regarding restorative justice, many, if not most, who oppose this long overdue reckoning do so because of the expected high price tag. Are such concerns valid?
Questions are always raised about reparations, cost, and who would get paid, and those are legitimate, complex matters to sort out, and we should sort them out. To deny even exploring how those and other matters can be addressed violates the full demands of justice. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has introduced H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. CLASP is proud to endorse this bill because we acknowledge the transatlantic slave trade, enslavement, Jim Crow, and a host of 20th century public policies have persecuted Black Americans, causing immense harm requiring repair. In so doing, we explore a path toward reparations so that Black Americans can receive the debt that is owed, leading lives more justified, whole, and free.
Well, that completes this interview. Thank you for your time and information. Listeners, you can read this full article on our website in this week's show notes.
Coming up, we have the commentary on this article. Do we agree with it? What grade do we give it? Do we like it? Do we hate it? Stay tuned.
Liking the show so far? One of the best ways to support this show is to leave us a rating on iTunes. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you, and we thank you for your support, and we thank you for clicking that subscribe button. You're family now, so come on in and make yourself at home. And we're back. What say you on the article, Reparations, One Necessary Step Toward Black Freedom?
I felt it was fair overall because of the emphasis on how Blacks have been treated in this society since slavery and through and after the Civil War. It made the very good case as to why it should be a going concern and worthy goal of this government to achieve for Americans descended of slavery. However, where I do have a problem with it is that the attempt that the writer makes in creating a coalition of other oppressed groups, I find tends to undermine his overall goal for support of reparations for Black Americans, because everybody has been impacted differently. Can there be coalitions of cooperation where they act as allies? No problem with that. But for us to both advocate for other groups in their legal justice claims, I tend to think that would be used as a means of undermining such a charge or coalition.
And I agree. Something else that stuck out was that this organization is in full support of one of ADOS's main tenets, and that is reparations. They're for it. So if, maybe that's something we can explore as far as working together. However, they would have to be on board with the specificity of our claim. Yes, there are other persecuted groups and we fully support their claims. However, ours is specific to us. All right, and that's how it's done. We interview the article or any type of news report, and then we give our 2 cents on it.
New segment alert. It's called #ADOS. This is where we grab our favorite tweets from the week under the #ADOS and share them with our listeners. If you make this segment, you have said something.
Something, that's it?
Yep. We like it, we share it, that's it.
Well, who said something this week?
Our first tweet from Mr. G. Redmond. Rich corporations need the same combo talking points aimed at ADOS spending habits on Jordans, cell phones, etc., except when aimed back at corporations. Replace Jordans, cell phones, and expensive clothing with stock buybacks, tax cuts, paying unlivable wages, and no cash in reserves for recession.
At Whisperwatch, the casinos are crying for free money. These people all know where to go when their lives are a little uncomfortable, but black bootstrappers are out here talking about begging the white man when ADOS demands reparations for repayment of an actual debt. #coronavirus.
From a tweet from Bihimbaba, kinda already felt we were in a recession, but the Rona... Kinda already felt we were in a recession, but the Rona pretty much solidified it. I suspect more ADOS are going to come to the realization of the need for Reparations 2020 and a black agenda rather quickly.
At Torn Rain, I have a simple question. Why do black people think they are immune to this virus? If we can get cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, HIV, AIDS, etc., what makes you think you were not able to get this one?
From a tweet from Jiwanzez, the white man gave you a book that spooked you into believing in hell. Why didn't the white man fear hell as he raped, mutilated, enslaved, and tortured your African ancestors for centuries? I guess hell is just a place for African. Unknown.
Thank you, family, for your tweets, your voices, and anything else that you say on behalf of ADOS. Anybody that was featured in this segment will be given full credit in our show notes, and you can go there, click on their tweets, and follow them if you already haven't. There you have it, family. Another week, another show. Thanks for joining us on the Articles of ADOS podcast. Make sure to visit our website, articlesofados.com, where you can join our mailing list, see the show notes for today's episode, and to leave us a voice message to be featured on the show.
Now that you're family, we'd love it if you'd like our Facebook page and join our private Articles of ADOS group. This is where you can connect with other listeners, give feedback, and share articles you would like us to discuss.
If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, send us an email to listeners@articlesofados.com. Be sure to tune in next week for a new episode of Undiscussed News you may have missed. Until next time, peace, fam.